On this episode, we will be revisiting an episode we recorded back in August of 2021. We are taking another small break because Anne just said goodbye to her husband. She needs a little time, so I hope you enjoy this episode. We sure did.
Hello, this is Ellen Butler, and I write the Karina Cardinal Mystery Series. An art heist, a cybercrime, a diamond theft, and artifact forgery. What do they all have in common? Karina Cardinal and her unchecked inquisitiveness. You are listening to the Dark and Stormy Book Club podcast.
Hello, and welcome to episode 179 of Dark and Stormy Book Club. And today we go to the spooky side, and we have a supernatural roundup.
Ooh.
Enjoy. I'm Ann Dark.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club.
A podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome.
If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
The first book I have is called A Charming Deception. It is by Tanya Capps. It is number 13 in the Magical Cures mystery series. June Heel and Oscar Park are a couple. They live in the town of Whispering Fall. She lives half in the supernatural world and half in the real world.
Okay.
So she's pregnant, and of course there are risks because she has this baby. Her husband is a human. There are questions whether she'll have a healthy baby. So she goes to see a specialist who happens to deal in this kind of thing, and she is put on bed rest. All the patients, when she goes in there, they're nosy and they want to know what's going on. She calls the baby Little One. She has an ultrasound, and there's all kinds of weird things that happen during the ultrasound, and the baby's just kind of acting up, so they put her on bed rest. Well, she goes to her next appointment. The receptionist for the doctor is found strangled to death.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
I know. She has to get involved.
These wouldn't be very interesting books if they sat back and said, oh, well.
Right. It appears that Roma, who was the receptionist for the doctor, she was being a little nosy about what was going about the doctor's patients that happened to have magic as their basis. And of course, it's a cozy, so it's kind of predictable. It was a little obvious as to who the murderer was, but it was a fun book. Now, this is number 13, and I just found this series. It apparently is the last one in the series.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I've got to go back and read all the ones that...
And you will.
Oh, yes.
Probably in a week.
Yeah, no, not in a week. The characters in this book are just so much fun. There's Prince Charming.
Oh.
There's a cat.
Of course.
I
think there's like a contract.
Yeah.
You have to have a cat.
Yes. It's got all kinds of the little herbs and their uses. And she's in the middle of a mystery, and she's due any minute to have this baby. The baby's not acting like a normal baby.
Oh, is she paranormal too?
He. It's going to be a boy. It's just a lot of fun. So Tanya Capps has written over 175 cozies.
Holy moly!
She has been on the bestseller list of USA Today and Women's World Book Club twice.
And I've never heard of her.
And I've never heard of her either until I found this book. You will enjoy this series, I'm sure, if the others are anything like this one. It is very good. And Tanya lives with her husband in northern Kentucky. She has 4 boys who have flown the coop. She writes full-time in a camper.
Wow.
And you can find her all over social media, but her website is tanyacaps.com.
Oh, very good. I like a good paranormal
Spellbinding
Yes,
tale.
yes. Now, I'm going to take us to the dark side.
Ooh.
Because that's how I roll. I did one on The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. It was put out in February of 2020 by Berkeley Press. I'm going to start off by saying this would make such an epic movie. Oh my gosh. Hollywood, just grab this book and make a movie of it because I will be first in line. Simone St. James is definitely an author to keep an eye on. The secrets lurking in the rundown roadside motel ensnare a young woman, just as they did her aunt 35 years before. In this new atmospheric suspense novel from the nationally best-selling and award-winning author of The Broken Girls, upstate New York, 1982. Every small town like Fell, New York, has a place like the Sundown Motel. Some customers are out of town, passing through on their way to someplace better. Some are locals trying to hide their secrets. Viv Delaney worked as a night clerk to pay for her move to New York City, but something isn't right at the Sundown, and before long she's determined to uncover all the secrets.
Ooh.
This was such a good story. I could not put this book down. Viv and her niece Carly, who comes along 35 years later, both work as night clerks at this hotel. They both end up in Fell, New York. I'm not sure if Fell, New York is a real place. I don't think it is.
I haven't heard that name before.
And if anything, it's such a small town, it wouldn't be on anybody's radar anyway. Carly comes along because she wants to try to figure out what happened to her aunt because her aunt disappeared from the motel 35 years before, and I mean completely disappeared. There's no trace of her.
She works at the hotel.
Yes. Viv worked at the hotel in 1982.
Her aunt.
Her aunt, yes, she's the aunt. And Carly's mother dies. So once Carly's mother died, she had heard all about Viv, and she was intrigued.
Oh, okay.
So
all right.
she shows up in Fell. I don't think she necessarily set out to work at the hotel, but they needed a night clerk. She took the job.
Okay.
This book did such a good job. You could hear the creaks. You could hear the wind blowing. Think about it. A almost deserted hotel, very few people there, and the people that are there are not necessarily on the up and up. They're your drug dealers. They're your people having affairs. They're just people trying to escape. So nobody's there on vacation. This book is told in 2 different timelines. It's told in Carly's timeline in 2017, and then you've got Viv's story from 1982. And this book really brought back some memories for me because I graduated in 1982. So I have some fond memories of that time. What tied the story together so well was the fact that there were a lot of the same characters in both timelines because Carly, while she's on this quest to try to figure out what happens to her aunt, she finds the police officer who investigated, a woman police officer. This woman is, at first, really doesn't want to give her any information. She's very hands-off. Then I think she takes Carly under her wing. The ending of this story is so satisfying. I just loved every minute of it. It's just how I would have wanted the book to end.
So Carly is more the protagonist than Viv.
Yeah, I would say so. Ghosts start to show up.
Ooh, goody.
Doors start to open on their own. She can smell cigarette smoke when there's nobody around. And then, how can you not like a story that a woman in a flower dress shows up and says, "Run"?
Ooh, not a book to read by yourself in a creepy old house.
I have never read anything by Simone St. James. I've heard a lot about the Broken Girls, and I definitely want to go back.
I've heard of Broken Girls, but I haven't read it.
Yes, she is now like jumping to the top of the list of an author that I am going to be looking forward to her next books.
Oh, good.
Simone St. James is the USA Today and New York Times best-selling author of The Sundown Motel, The Broken Girls, and The Haunting of Maddie Clare, which won 2 Rita Awards from Romance Writers of America and the Arthur Ellis Award from Crime Writers of Canada. She wrote her first ghost story about a haunted library when she was in high school and spent 20 years behind the scenes in the television business before leaving to write full-time. She lives outside Toronto, Canada, with her husband and a very spoiled cat.
I didn't know my cat lived part-time in Canada. I have the most spoiled cat in the world.
Yeah, Saki is quite the diva.
My second book is called Murder Take Two. It is by Carol J. Berry. It is number 10 in her Witch City mystery series. It is by Kensington, and we thank Michelle and Larissa for sending us this book to review. When a copycat killer has reporter Lee Barrett brushing up on ancient history, it's a test where failure could be fatal. Lee Barrett is a field reporter for a television station and an amateur sleuth in Salem, Massachusetts, my favorite city in the whole world. She is well versed in the history of Salem. She works part-time at the Salem Historical Society Museum, which we have visited many times.
Yep.
When the murder of a revered local professor, Samuel Bond, resembles a killing from almost 200 years ago, everyone is on edge, especially Assistant Professor Cody McGinnis. Not only did Cody have differences with Professor Bond, he even taught a course on the historic murder. And when his fingerprints and ladder are found at the crime scene, the police are certain of his guilt. Cody's family, however, believes otherwise and asks Lee for her assistance. Now, with the help of her clairvoyant cat Orion, her tech-savvy librarian Aunt Ibby, and Pete Mondello, her handsome Detective Bo, obligatory policeman,
Yeah.
Lee will delve deeper than ever into Salem's past and into her own psychic gifts to find the real killer before someone else is history.
Ooh, dun dun dun.
I like this series. It's got a lot of historical facts mixed in with your obligatory cozy. It's a fun read. My books are both lighthearted. Right now in my life, I need some lighthearted.
Yep.
Dark stuff right now has to take a backseat. She has these friends. Well, I guess they're sort of relatives. They're twins. They're retired policemen, and they are so much fun in this series. They're always helping her out and getting into all kinds of antics. If you visited Salem, you can picture the places that are in the story, because she does mix a lot of the present with the past. It's a series, when I pick it up, I know I'm going to enjoy it.
You're going to get entertained.
Yeah. She has a cat. She lives on the 3rd floor of a house. She will come in her entrance, the cat will be on the 3rd floor, and before she gets to the first step, the cat's beside her.
As only cats can
It's
do.
only...
Maybe there's
Could
2, and she just doesn't know
Well,
it.
that could be it. Aunt Ibby is a lot of fun. She's not the comic relief in the story because the 2 brothers are more the comic relief. She's the voice of reason. When Lee gets a little confused or something, she brings her down.
Oh, okay.
Talks her down and gives her a little dose.
So what's the paranormal element of this
Well,
story?
she has some psychic abilities. She's not quite comfortable with them. She's an empath, I would say.
okay.
But the cat is the comic relief. I mean,
Yeah.
the cat is definitely supernatural. The whole Salem atmosphere,
Uh-huh.
there's a few characters that are actual Salem, I guess you would say, superstars that show up in this book. So,
Any of our relatives?
no, not yet. But give them time. Our relatives, I'm sure, will show up eventually. But this whole series is fun. If you want a lighthearted, supernatural, but not scary book to read. I knew the ending before it got here, but
Well, that's pretty typical with cozies. You don't expect
it's not going to be earth-changing.
yeah.
But it was.
But they're still fun.
Carol J. Perry is the author of the Witch City Mystery Series and the Haunted Haven series, both from Kensington. The Witch City stories take place in the magical city of Salem, Massachusetts. Carol was actually born in Salem on Halloween Eve.
Oh, wow. She had to write these.
Right, and she knows the city well. The Haunted Haven books take place in Carol's adopted home state of Florida. As an experienced travel writer for magazines and newspapers, Carol knows her way around the Sunshine State, too. The Salem books are based, of course, on a real city, but Haven, Florida is made up. Readers of the Witch City books have come to know Orion as a most remarkable cat. Carol lives in the Tampa Bay area of Florida with her husband Dan. Now, for a note, there is more than one author with the name Carol Perry, so make sure you get Carol J. Perry.
Oh, good note, because that happens to me sometimes.
Yeah. Her website is caroljperry.com.
So we stay balanced and even here. I'm going to do another dark one.
Good.
This book is called Theme Music. It's by T. Marie Vandelli, and it came out in July of 2019 by Dutton Books. Now I'm going to have to give a trigger warning. There are some very graphic, violent scenes in this book, so if that's something that really bothers you, you may want to skip this one. For those who can enjoy that type of book, here we go. For the lucky among us, life is what you make of it. But for Dixie Wheeler, the theme music for her story was chosen by another long ago. On the day her father butchered her mother and brothers and then slashed a knife across his own throat. Only 1-year-old Dixie was left alive. Infamously known as Baby Blue for the song left playing in the aftermath of the slaughter. 25 years later, Dixie is still desperate for a connection to the family she can't remember. So when her childhood home goes up for sale, Dixie sets aside all reason and moves in, creating a macabre decor with her family's salvaged furniture. But as the ghosts of her family seemingly begin to take up residence in the home that was once theirs, Dixie starts to question her own sanity and wonders if the evil force menacing her is that of her father or a demon of her own making. In order to make sense of her present, Dixie becomes determined to unravel the truth of her past and seeks out the detective who originally investigates the murder. But the more she learns, the more she opens up an uncomfortable possibility that the sins of her father may become to another, and perhaps more tragically to Dixie herself. As bodies began to pile up around her, Dixie must find a way to expose the lunacy behind her family's massacre and redeem what little remains of her soul.
Ew.
Oh my goodness. This book, holy moly.
That's one I'm going to read.
Yeah. Dixie Wheeler is an adult, and she has a great relationship with her boyfriend.
Policeman.
No, he's not, because this definitely is not a cozy. She pretty much throws everything aside to go on this quest to buy her childhood home. When I say throw everything aside, that's because the boyfriend is like, no, I am not going to buy your murdered family's house. Since she's on her own and she just wants to get in there, she ends up renting the house. She moves in, and her uncle happened to have the family's furniture in like an old barn or something. So she actually recreates the house just like it was when
She's only a year old. How does she know?
There's lots of pictures, and her family told her what goes where. All growing up, Dixie was referred to as Baby Blue because that was the song that was playing on a record player. Baby Blue is a song by Badfinger. Kids teased her and called her because there was a big write-up in the paper and stuff. I'm sure you are thinking the same thing I did. This girl's nuts.
Yeah.
But when you start to read the story, you kind of get it because she was only a year old, so she has no memory of the murder itself. There is absolutely none whatsoever. And she kind of grew up with a lot of tragedy even past this because she ends up moving in with an aunt, and her cousin, who's around her same age, or actually the cousin was a little bit older, has a disease that she slowly watches her cousin die. And her cousin actually asks her to hold a pillow over her head because she's suffering. Dixie's not a happy-go-lucky person. So she moves in, and pretty soon after moving in, she starts...
Did she kill the cousin?
I'm not going to tell you that. You have to read the book to find out. These reviews aren't spoilers. But once she moves in, she quickly starts to see things. She sees her brother's headless body.
Oh, good. I'm moving into a new house. This is probably not the book to read.
It's true. That's true. She is. Just bought a new house. But you also have to question, is she really seeing these things? Because she ends up hooking up with the officer who investigated. He's retired, and she ends up having dinner with him and stuff. And he shows her the photos of the crime scene. She has those in her head. So you have to think, is she really seeing those, or is she just manifesting those in her own brain? But then she starts to hear her mother and father's voices telling her what to do, like giving her advice. When her boyfriend that just dropped her shows up, the father's actually in, like I said, you don't know if it's in her head or if she's really, he's saying, why don't you get rid of him? Why don't you take an axe, and you know how to do this. People are getting murdered not left and right. It always seems to happen when she doesn't have an alibi, and she's like really starting to question herself. Did I take after my father? Do I have my father's genes? But then some evidence shows up that maybe her father didn't necessarily do this.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. So that's where I'm going to leave it, because I wish I could get every last one of you to read this book because it was so good. And in the end, the truth is not always the truth. And it truly kept me guessing till the end.
Ooh, this sounds...
Yeah, so you couldn't get any more paranormal than this. The whole book was paranormal.
I'm not moving in my new house, so I got exorcist in there first.
Yeah, you don't know what happened in there. So T. Marie Vandelli says, though I have always wanted to write professionally, to actually have one of my novels published, surpassed my wildest dreams. Theme music is my first novel to be published, but is not the first novel I ever wrote. In my late 20s, I wrote a horrible novel with equally horrible titles, The Shadow Man. Thankfully, it was never published, but I look back on that sad, pitiful, ill-conceived novel with great joy and affection. It proved that I could do it, and I could finish a work of fiction. I could build and develop characters, I could determine and implement a plot, and most importantly, I could type fast enough to keep up with my brain. I would love to keep on writing, but a girl's gotta eat, which I did consistently for 25 years. Until I got laid off. Truly a blessing in disguise. It didn't take me more than a couple of seconds to decide to sell my house, cash in my 401k, and start writing full time. I am currently working on my next novel and can't stop thinking about the one after that. And the one after that. I think I like this girl.
Yeah, very good. That gives you 4 books to read.
Creepy.
Read hers in bright sunlight. You can read mine at night, not hers.
Yeah.
4 good choices.
Yeah, and a good variety there. So if you're looking to get your spooky on, here you go.
Trivia. Last week's question was, how did Walter Mosley make publishing history in 1997? A. He sold 1 million books. B. He self-published his books. C. He went with a small independent publisher. Or D. He signed the rights of his books to a friend. The answer is C. Mosley made publishing history in 1997 by foregoing in advance to give the manuscript of Gone Fishing to a small independent publisher, Black Classic Press in Baltimore, run by former Black Panther Paul Coates. This week's question: which famous mystery author was born James Dover Grant? A. Jeffrey Deaver, B. Dan Brown, C. Stuart Wood, or D. Lee Child. Good luck. Well, we thank you for listening. We hope you join us next week. And remember,
Life would be boring and non-spooky without a little mystery.
bye.